morning, the Harrow boys rode up to Crow Mesa. They did not look at Nora Whitcomb's horses. They did not look at her windmill, her dry well, or the empty rifle rack hanging inside the open barn. They looked at the brass rose pinned to the black collar of her morning dress. And no outlaw in New Mexico territory crossed 18 miles of heat for a piece of cheap jewelry, unless that jewelry could open something. The year was 1877, and the desert east of San Aurelio had baked so hard the ground broke in plates under a boot heel. 2 months had passed since Nora's husband, Abel Whitcomb, had been carried out of the Black Mesa shaft with his ribs crushed, and his hands still closed around a survey chain. The men who brought him home called it an accident. Nora had believed them for exactly one night. By the next morning, 2 claim notices had vanished from the recorder's wall. 3 of Abel's partners had left town without selling a single tool, and Lionel Bex, the county recorder, had begun wearing a new silver watch he could not afford. Nora was 19 years old, too young to be called a widow without making decent people look away. She had a pale face burned red by desert wind, dark hair pinned tight beneath a black bonnet, and hands that had started to harden from chores she had never expected to do alone. The brass rose was the only pretty thing she still wore. Abel had given it to her on their wedding morning. 5 petals, a bent stem, a tiny catch under the lowest leaf that no one noticed unless they already knew it was there. When the 3 Harrow brothers stopped at her gate, Nora's hand went to that rose before it went anywhere else. Pike Harrow swung down first. He was the oldest, broad in the shoulders, calm in the eyes, and mean in the careful way of a man who liked making fear last longer than it needed to. His brothers, Dent and Lyle, stayed mounted behind him, blocking the gate like they had already decided what belonged to them. "Mrs. Whitcomb," Pike said, "this weather'll kill a woman if grief doesn't get to her first." "The gate is shut for a reason," Nora said. Pike smiled at that. There are smiles a man gives because something is funny, and there are smiles a man gives because he thinks the world is already bent his way. Pike wore the second kind. "We didn't ride all morning to visit," he said. "Save you from paperwork you don't understand." Nora lifted her chin. "The paper in this house belongs to me." Dent laughed under his breath. Lyle did not laugh at all. He was watching the windows, the barn loft, the water trough, the long shadows under the porch. Nervous men notice danger. Guilty men notice witnesses. Pike stepped closer. "Abel filed claims he had no business filing," he said. "Black Mesa's disputed ground now. Recorder Beck says your safest course is to turn over the Whitcomb papers, sell the ranch, and go live with kin. I have no kin nearby." "That," Pike said softly, "is what makes this easy." Nora's fingers closed around the brass rose. Pike saw it. His eyes sharpened. For a moment, his whole manner changed. The polite voice drained out of him, and what remained was the truth of the errand. "Take off the pin." Nora did not move. The wind pushed dust across the yard in a low brown sheet. Somewhere inside the barn, a loose hinge tapped once, then again. "Take it off," Pike said. "No." It was not a loud word. It was not even steady all the way through. But it stood. Pike grabbed her wrist so fast the bones in Nora's hand struck the brass rose and sent a bright sting up her arm. His fingers tightened until her wedding ring bit into her skin. "Your husband hid a key in that flower," he said, his mouth close enough for her to smell tobacco and sour coffee. "Bex wants it by sundown. I don't plan to disappoint him for a girl who still thinks morning black can protect her." Nora tried to pull away. Pike's other hand reached for the rose. Then a voice came from the shade beside the empty tack shed. "If that hand touches my niece again, Pike, I will take it off at the wrist." The yard went still. The man standing beside the shed had not been there a second earlier, or else he had been there so quietly the desert itself had failed to notice him. He wore a faded brown duster, a sweat-stained hat, and boots scarred white from old stone. His beard was iron gray. His left cheek carried a thin rope of scar from the corner of his eye to his jaw. His right hand hung open beside his holster. Nora's breath broke. "Uncle Mace." Matthew Rourke had not used his full name in 20 years. From the Pecos to the border towns, men called him Mace, because that was what he had once been to anyone foolish enough to corner him. Nora had heard the stories from her mother in half-whispers, always after the lamps were turned low. Some said he had ridden with rangers. Some said he had hunted rustlers for judges who did not want their names spoken. Some said he had killed 13 men before he ever turned 30. Mace never corrected a story. He had ridden in from the east after Nora's letters stopped arriving. Pike kept hold of her wrist, but the confidence leaked out of his face. "Rourke," he said. Mace took one step into the sun. "Let her go." Dent's hand slid toward the shotgun across his saddle. Mace's revolver came up with a speed that did not look like speed until the sound arrived. The shot split the leather strap holding Dent's shotgun. The weapon dropped hard into the dust before Dent's fingers touched it. The horse shied. Just before Dent's fingers touched it. The horse shied. Dent froze with both hands in the air. Lyle swallowed so loudly even Nora heard it. Mace did not raise his voice. "The next piece of leather I cut will have meat under it." Pike released Nora as if her skin had burned him. She stumbled back against the porch post, clutching the brass rose to her chest. Mace looked from one brother to the next. "I know who sent you. I know why. I know how far a frightened clerk will go when rich men promise him a railroad spur. What I do not know is whether you boys are smart enough to leave while you still have shadows." Pike's jaw worked, but no answer came. Mace nodded toward the open road. "Ride." Dent was the first to turn his horse. Lyle followed at once. Pike backed away last, hate and calculation fighting across his face. "This claim won't save her," he said. "Bex has more men than you have bullets." Mace holstered his revolver. "Then he should send them in a straight line." The Harrow brothers rode out through the white heat, leaving the dropped shotgun in the dust. Nora stood on the porch until the dust of them thinned and the desert took back its silence. Only then did her knees fail. Mace caught her before she hit the boards. Inside the ranch house, the air smelled of sun-warmed timber, old coffee, and the lavender Nora had hung in the window to cover the scent of grief. Mace set her at the kitchen table and poured water from a clay jug. He did not ask whether she was all right. Men like Mace knew better than to ask questions that had no honest answer. Nora turned the brass rose in her fingers. "They knew," she said. "Abel told me no one knew." Abel told you what would keep you alive for one more day, Mace said. He took the rose gently and felt under the lowest leaf. The catch gave under his thumbnail. The stem slid out no longer than a matchstick, hollow at the center, with a notched brass key hidden inside. Nora looked at it like she was seeing her husband speak from the dead. Mace laid the key on the table. What does it open? Drawer 7 at the Santa Felice assay room, Nora said. Abel said if anyone challenged the claim, I was to take the key to Mr. Ansel at the assay office. There are maps inside, receipts, his survey notes, a letter from a man with the Southern Pacific right-of-way office. Mace's face tightened. Railroad interest? Nora nodded. Abel found silver first, and something else in the black rock. He said the ore would matter once the rail came through. Men would smile at us until they knew what it was worth. Mace looked toward the window where the harrows had vanished. Men like Bex don't wait for ore to become valuable. They steal the ground before the value has a name. Nora pushed a folded sheet across the table. I found this under the flower bin after Abel died. It was a sketch map drawn in Abel's narrow hand. The Black Mesa vein cut through 3 small claims and ended under an old Spanish grant that had been sleeping in courthouse dust for 40 years. Beside the mesa, Abel had marked 4 names: Whitcomb, Calder, Reyes, Bex. The last name had been circled twice. Mace studied the page. Because Bex filed a new boundary line the day after Abel's funeral, Nora said. He moved the arroyo on paper, moved it just enough to put the vein outside Abel's claim. Mace looked up. Can he do that? With a crooked map and a recorder's seal, he can make a lie stand long enough for honest people to starve. For the first time that day, Mace almost smiled. Your father would have liked you. Nora's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back. My father died thinking you were a dangerous man. He was right. Then be dangerous for us. The line landed between them like a match dropped into oil. Mace folded Abel's map and slid it into his coat. At first light, we go to Santa Felice for that drawer. Nora looked out at the empty yard. They won't wait for first light. No, Mace said. They won't. Night came without mercy. The day bled out red behind the mesa, and the house shrank under the wide, dark sky. Nora tried to sleep in her bed, but every board creak became a boot step. Every coyote cry became a signal. Every gust of wind against the shutters became Pike Harrow's hand closing over her wrist again. Mace did not sleep at all. He sat on the porch with a Winchester across his knees and watched the black line of the road. Just after 2 in the morning, a mule came stumbling out of the mesquite with foam on its bit, and a man bent low over the saddle. Mace had the rifle shouldered before the rider reached the gate. Tomas Ortega, the man gasped. Do not shoot me, unless you mean to waste the only warning you're getting. Tomas ran the livery in San Aurelio. He was small, bow-legged, and older than any man who still moved that fast had a right to be. He slid off the mule and nearly fell. Mace caught his arm. Talk. Bex hired Rafe Keene, Tomas said. Mace's expression did not change, but the hand on Tomas's arm tightened. You're sure? I heard it with my own ears from the stall wall. Keene came in after midnight, long rifle wrapped in oilcloth, 6 riders with him. They are waiting in the dry wash north of your place. Keene climbs the ridge before dawn. Once he fires, the others burn the house and call it frontier trouble. Nora had come to the doorway in her shawl. At the name Keene, she looked from Tomas to Mace. "Who is Rafe Keene?" Mace answered without looking at her. "A man who kills from far away so he doesn't have to hear what dying sounds like." Tomas crossed himself. "They say he never takes a second shot." "Everybody says something," Mace said. But he stood, and the easy old slouch left his body. Nora saw then that the stories had not made him larger than he was. They had made him smaller, because stories could not hold the cold attention that came over him when dangers stopped being rumor and became work. Mace turned to Tomas. "There is an old limestone cistern behind the mission ruins. Does it still hold? Dry as a bone, but it hides a person well. Take Nora there." "No," Nora said. Mace looked at her. "The Ridge owns this house. If Keene reaches it, every window becomes a promise. I am not leaving Abel's papers." Mace took the brass key from the table and pressed it into her palm. "The papers are worth nothing if you die before they can speak." Nora closed her fist over the key. "I already buried my husband because men wanted this ground. I will not hide while they take the rest." "You are not hiding," Mace said. "You are carrying the one thing Bex cannot forge." That stopped her. Outside, the wind moved dust along the porch boards with a sound like dry fingernails. Mace softened his voice. "Your job is to live long enough to open drawer 7. Mine is to make sure Keene never gets a clean look at you." Nora stepped closer and touched the scar on his cheek, a gesture from childhood she seemed to remember only after doing it. "You came back very late, Uncle Mace." "I know. Come back twice." For a moment the hard planes of his face looked tired enough to break. Then he nodded. "I will." Tomas led Nora into the mesquite while the stars still burned hard above the house. She carried the brass rose inside her closed fist, not on her dress, hidden again in its stem. Mace watched until the darkness swallowed them both. Then he made the ranch house lie. He set one lamp behind the kitchen curtain, another in the front room. He hung Nora's black shawl over a chair where it would show from the ridge. He propped his hat on a broom handle near the bedroom window and tied a string from the porch to the latch so the shutter would move when the wind did. It was not a fortress. It was bait. Before dawn, Mace left the porch and climbed toward the ridge by a goat path no sane rider would take. The first shot came when the eastern sky had just begun to pale. It did not sound like a pistol or a carbine. It sounded like the mesa itself had cracked. The bedroom window burst inward. The broom handle snapped. Mace's hat spun into the room and landed on the floor with a neat round hole through the crown. Keene had fired from the ridge above the North Wash, exactly where a proud rifleman would sit if he believed his prey was trapped below. Mace was already crawling behind him. The climb tore skin from his palms. Choya needles caught in his sleeve. Twice, loose stones shifted under his knee and threatened to send him sliding down the face of the ridge. Mace did not curse. He moved like a man following a debt. Rafe Keene lay behind a flat slab of rock, tall hat pushed back, cheek resting against the stock of a Sharp's rifle. He was lean, narrow, and pale from too many dawns spent waiting for other men to step into his sights. He opened the rifle's breech and reached for a fresh cartridge. Mace pressed the muzzle of his Colt against the back of Keen's neck. "Morning, Rafe." Keen went still. "Rourke," he said. "I wondered what kind of fool would use a hat for a head. The kind who remembered you never moved after the first shot." Keen let out a dry breath. "A man gets sentimental about habits. Where are the 6? North Wash. Signal. 2 shots from this rifle. Then they ride." Mace took the sharps with his free hand. "Who bought you?" Keen's mouth twisted. "You know who." "I know who paid. I asked who bought you." For the first time, Keen said nothing. Mace pressed the Colt harder. "I have no affection left for riddles." Keen closed his eyes. "Bex has my girl." Mace did not move. "Say it plain." "My daughter, Mary, 16. She came to San Aurelio looking for work at the laundry. Bex's men took her yesterday. He said if Mrs. Whitcomb breathed after sunrise, Mary would not." The ridge wind moved between them. Below, the ranch house glowed with false lamplight. Beyond it, somewhere in the dark mesquite, Nora was carrying a key no court seal could replace. Mace looked at Keen and saw a hired killer, a coward with distance between himself and the blood he spilled. Then he saw something worse, a father made useful by fear. "Mary alive?" "She was when I saw her through the bars." "Where?" "Cellar under the recorder's office. Old wine room. 1 door from the alley." Mace pulled the Colt back half an inch. Keen looked over his shoulder in disbelief. "You should kill me." "I probably should." "Then why not?" "Because killing you gets me 6 riders, 1 crooked recorder, and a dead girl. Using you might get me witnesses." Keen stared at him. Mace handed in the sharps, butt first. "Make your second shot." Keen's eyes narrowed. "At what?" "At that dead juniper above the wash. Low. Miss on purpose. Make them ride early." "And then?" Mace looked down at the pale ribbon of the dry wash. "Then we teach Bex the danger of hiring men with daughters." Keen studied him for 1 long second. Then he chambered around and fired. The report rolled across the desert. A flock of birds exploded from the mesquite. In the North Wash, 6 riders broke cover. They came fast, spread in a shallow line, carrying torches and carbines, and enough confidence to make them careless. They expected a widow in a burning house, and an old gunman pinned below. They did not expect the first shot to come from their own ridge. Keen fired once. A torch flew out of a rider's hand and spun into the sand. Mace slid down through the rocks and reached the wash ahead of the riders, moving through smoke and dust as if the desert had opened a private road for him. He did not shoot first to kill. He shot to break their charge, to drop reins, to slap hats from heads, to put bullets into canteens and stirrup leather and the boards of the old bridge they had to cross. But frightened men with guns do not stay neat. One rider fired blind and cut a line across Mace's upper arm. Another jumped from his saddle behind a fallen cottonwood and took careful aim. Keen saw him first. The sharps roared. The cottonwood bark burst beside the man's face, and the carbine dropped from his hands. "Alive!" Mace shouted. Then stop standing where they can see you, Keen shouted back. The fight lasted less than 3 minutes. It felt long enough for the sun to rise twice. When it ended, 2 horses had bolted. 3 men were face down in the sand with their hands tied behind them. One had a broken collarbone, and the last was crying into his sleeve, with no wound at all except the sudden discovery that he was mortal. Mace wrapped his bleeding arm with a strip torn from a bandana and looked at the prisoners. You were hired to burn a widow in her bed, he said. The next words out of your mouths decide whether the judge hears your story or the desert does. The man with the broken collarbone spoke first. Bex, he said. Recorder Bex. He paid half up front, promised the rest when the rose was found. Mace nodded. Keen was already saddling a captured horse. We ride for town, he said. Mace looked toward the east, where the first strip of sunrise touched the edge of the mesa. No. First we collect Nora. They found the mission cistern just as light came over the broken adobe walls. Tomas sat outside with a shotgun across his knees, trying not to look terrified. Nora came up from the dry stone pit with dust in her hair and the brass rose pinned back on her collar. She saw the blood on Mace's sleeve. You came back, she said. Once, Mace answered. Still owe you another. Keen looked at the rose. That little flower caused a war. Nora met his eyes. No, greed did. No one argued. San Aurelio had begun its ordinary day badly. A baker opened his shutters. A woman beat a rug over a rail. 2 freight wagons creaked into the square. Then Mace Rourke rode in, with Rafe Keen on one side, Nora Whitcomb on the other, and 6 tied men dragging behind them like proof too heavy to deny. The town went quiet in layers. First the children stopped running. Then the men outside the barber shop stood. Then the clerk in the telegraph office leaned out far enough to see the blood on Mace's sleeve, and shut his mouth. Lionel Bex appeared on the balcony of the recorder's office, wearing his fine coat, his fine watch, and the face of a man trying to decide which lie was still usable. Rourke, he called down. This is an ugly disturbance for a Thursday morning. Mace swung down from his horse. It was uglier at 4. Nora dismounted with the brass rose bright at her throat. She did not hide behind Mace. That mattered. Everyone in the square saw it. Bex's gaze fixed on the flower. Mrs. Whitcomb, he said, changing his voice into something soft and official. You have been frightened by violent men. Come inside. We can settle this legally. Nora walked to the foot of the recorder's steps. Legally is what you feared. Bex's smile tightened. Mace threw Abel's folded map onto the boardwalk. Keen dropped a leather packet beside it. Inside were Bex's payment notes, a forged boundary sketch, and 3 sealed letters from investors in El Paso, promising cash once the Black Mesa title was cleared. The crowd pressed closer. Bex looked at Keen. You fool. Keen raised the sharps just enough for the morning sun to catch the barrel. Where is my daughter? For the first time, Bex's face broke. Only a little, only around the eyes. But a crowd can smell guilt when it has been waiting years for a name. The sheriff came out of the jail across the square. He was a heavy man with a tired mustache and the expression of someone who had spent too long knowing the truth without evidence strong enough to carry it. Mace pointed to the tied riders. 6 witnesses, 1 attempted burning, 1 paid marksman, 1 kidnapped girl in your cellar, if Keene is still worth listening to. You want more, Sheriff, or will this serve? The sheriff looked at Bex. Bex, open the cellar. Bex took 1 step backward. His right hand moved toward his coat. Nora saw the movement before the sheriff did. Mace. Mace turned. Bex pulled a small pistol from inside his coat. Mace. Mace turned. Bex pulled a small pistol from inside his coat. Keene fired. The shot blew the silver watch chain clean off Bex's vest and shattered the balcony post beside his hip. The little pistol fell to the planks. Bex sank to his knees, shaking so hard the whole town could see it. Mace climbed the stairs slowly. He picked up the pistol, emptied it, and dropped the cartridges into Bex's hat. That, he said, was the second time today somebody kinder than me kept you alive. The cellar door was behind the recorder's office, half covered by feed sacks. The sheriff broke the lock with an axe. They found Mary Keene in the old wine room, cold, hungry, and alive. She came into the light with her hair loose around her face, and Rafe Keene made a sound no one in San Aurelio ever forgot. It was not a word. It was the sound of a hard man discovering he had not lost everything. While father and daughter held each other in the alley, Nora took the key from the brass rose and walked to the Santa Felice assay room at the edge of the square. Mr. Ansel, the assayer, unlocked drawer 7 with shaking hands. Inside lay Abel's original survey, 2 witness receipts, ore notes, the railroad letter, and a narrow strip of vellum marked with the true Arroyo line in Abel's ink. The lie Bex had drawn was neat. Abel's truth was exact. By sunset, Lionel Bex sat in his own jail. The Harrow brothers were arrested before they made the county line. The forged boundary was struck from the record, and the Black Mesa claim returned to Nora Whitcomb under the eyes of half the town. It did not bring Abel back. That was the kind of truth no courtroom could repair. But the ranch remained. The papers remained. The brass rose remained. And Nora, who had started that morning as a girl men expected to fold, ended it standing at the recorder's counter, while grown men removed their hats before speaking to her. 3 weeks later, the first wagon of ore left Black Mesa under guard. Not enough to make Nora rich, not yet, but enough to pay the debt on the ranch, reopen the shaft with honest timbering, and put wages in the hands of men who had refused Bex's money, when refusing it still cost them something. Rafe Keene stayed in San Aurelio until Mary was strong enough to travel. He gave Nora the Sharp's rifle before he left. "I have carried it too long," he said. Nora did not take it. "Keep it," she told him, "but aim it at things you can look in the eye." Keene lowered his head, accepted the mercy without pretending he deserved it, and rode south with his daughter beside him. Mace stayed until the new lock was fitted on the assay drawer, until Pike Harrow's trial date was posted, until the sheriff learned to walk past the recorder's office without lowering his eyes. Then one morning he saddled his horse before breakfast. Nora met him at the gate. The desert was cool for once. Dawn lay blue against the mesa. The brass rose was pinned to her plain work dress now, not her morning black. "You could stay," she said. Mace tightened the cinch. I'm not built for staying. You were built for arriving late and making trouble. That's closer. She tried to smile. It almost worked. Will I see you again? Mace looked toward the road, then back at her. When the shadows get long enough, you send a letter. They stopped my letters last time. Then send two. Nora touched the brass rose. For years she would remember that morning, not because he rode away, but because she did not beg him not to. Something had changed in her during those days. Grief was still there. Fear was still there. But neither one held the reins alone anymore. Mace put on his hat. Abel gave you a rose, he said. Turns out he gave it thorns, too. Nora looked out over the hard, bright land that men had tried to take by paper, fire, and fear. No, she said. The thorns were mine. Mace's mouth moved in the smallest smile she had ever seen from him. Then he rode into the morning, a lean old shadow against the desert light, until horse and rider blurred into dust and distance. Nora stayed at the gate long after he was gone. The brass rose caught the sun at her collar. It no longer looked like mourning. It looked like proof.